All right, my name is Robert Cowan, and this is sponsored by Visitation Valley Community Unity. Just want to say thank you to everyone that logged on today for this event to have a discussion with Brian Adam, who is a District 10 Supervisor candidate. Visitation Valley Community Unity is a group of community leaders that have come together to give voice to Visitation Valley. We understand that it has been neglected for some time and the people ignored by power brokers. And so we come to provide information and a pathway to bring people together and solidify their voice and get their voices heard so that decisions can be made. Right now, we are grateful to have several of our members with us. And I will say that with us today is Russell Marine and Rex Tabora, Marlene Tran are all participating in this. We have as well Josephine Zhao and Edith Yamanoa and Jessica Ho as parts of BVCU as well. Welcome to Brian Adam. Thank you so much, sir, for coming and participating in today's discussion. My hope is that the information that you provide will help voters make a decision in a few weeks. So thank you very much. Is there anything you want to say as an opening statement before we get to the questions?
Sure, that would be great, Robert. Thanks again, and thanks to Viz Valley Community Unity for setting aside this time to give me an opportunity to talk and answer some questions from the community. I guess I wanted to just state for everyone's benefit, again, my name is Brian Adam. My parents are both immigrants from Iraq. My dad came to the United States as a refugee, leaving because of war in Iraq. My parents married abroad, came together when I was born. I was born and raised in San Jose, and I moved to the city several years ago. And for all that time, I've been working for the city and county of San Francisco, during which time I feel like I've learned a lot about the way the city government works. And I think the big thing that I'm committed to is just building coalition across a big diverse district like District 10, and just making sure that as many people as possible is heard. And with that, I'm ready and eager to answer any questions you may have.
All right, fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Question number one, please tell us about yourself and why you are qualified to be the next District 10 supervisor.
Sure, thanks for that question, Robert. Well, I guess I shared a little bit of my backstory, but before I came to the city, I worked as an engineering specialist and engineer for Seagate Technology. I worked basically the whole entire time I was completing my undergraduate. And from that perspective, I feel like I have a really good perspective on what young people are dealing with because of the cost of living issues that all families are facing inside the Bay Area and the challenges of going to school and wanting to avoid student loan debt. So I feel like I bring that perspective of what we can maybe do for our young people that are trying to get their education to earn money to support their families and kind of get that better life that a lot of for basically all parents, right, that they want to give a better life to their children and helping them secure that. Before I joined the city, I also had the opportunity to work in the district office of Assemblyman Evan Lowe, a politician that represents parts of the peninsula and the South Bay at the state level. In his office, I talked with residents. I summarized some of the concerns that residents had for the member. I responded to a lot of the concerns of residents, and I did some policy research for K through 12 mental health, which was fairly timely because COVID, when it put so many students into distance learning situations, learning from home, mental health problems or mental health challenges were an issue as students were stressed, feeling lonely, or doing their distance education. So I think I'm no stranger to doing research. I'm no stranger to reading about policy and what's kind of going through the works. And living in San Francisco, I've been involved as a volunteer for a number of organizations inside District 10. One that's been most recent that I've been most active in is the Dog Patch in Northwest Potrero Hill Green Benefit District. I think what I bring to the table is I'm a young guy. I'm eager to help. I'm committed to public service, not necessarily trying to get my name out there to become famous. I think because I've been working for the city for several years now, I'm committed to doing work that helps people. I think when I was working at CK Technology, I was already doing that, trying to help people get promoted, helping them write their resumes, helping them write and argue on their own behalf to get those promotions. And coming into the city now, I feel like I'm doing work that's positively impacting the community more, and I'm trying to get more involved to bring a bigger positive impact, to build coalitions, and to share what I'm seeing across the neighborhood with other people in the neighborhood so that we can share our solutions, share what we've learned and the challenges we're facing. And I think that's what I'm bringing to the table as a supervisor candidate. And I think that my focus on certain issues will be a breath of fresh air when I look at the whole panel of the Board of Supervisors.
All right, well, thank you so much for that answer. And the second question is, if elected, what will be your top 3 priorities?
Thank you for that question, Robert. My top 3 priorities are affordable housing, public safety, and public transit. And I'm more than happy to elaborate on that.
Well, it's up to you.
I guess when it comes to housing affordability, I think there's a number of things we can do. Right now, I feel like we're basically given a false set of choices. We're asked to give private developers everything they want or only some of what they want. I think that we need to kind of step back and reframe that conversation and think about the ways that the city can become a real public housing or social housing provider so that we have a public competitor with private developers so that there's more pressure for them to provide quality development at an affordable rate rather than focusing on, whatever they can get past the city. I think that there's also a lot of programs right now that do support people, helping them get into below market rate units, providing first-time homebuyer loans in the city. I think we can expand these programs to support people changing from being renters to homeowners if that's what they want to see. And I think that there are other conversations we can have for making the Bay Area more affordable, starting with San Francisco, because that's where we're at. And I think we can start collaborating more with our state level legislators and other public representatives around the Bay Area to make sure that we're building more homes all around the Bay Area, not just expecting San Jose and San Francisco to be the only source of all the new housing inside the Bay Area, trying to spread that out and making sure that the opportunities you make available to all people in the Bay Area are all over the Bay Area. When it comes to public safety, I think that every neighborhood has different needs, and I'm willing to just bring those different perspectives, talking to people on the ground, knowing what's going on and bringing that perspective. There are simple ways we can deter crime by reimbursing people getting private cameras, bringing in motion detectors with some lights so that during the nighttime, we can deter certain kinds of crime just by shining a light, letting people know that they're being watched. But I also think that there are some kinds of crimes like graffiti and vandalism, which when we consider maybe who are doing those crimes, if we give people other things to do, we won't be seeing as many of those kinds of crimes. I know in other places in the Bay Area, there have been many programs where the expansion of summer and after school programs discourages younger people from participating in vandalism, graffiti. I know in other parts of the country, a lot of younger people are the ones that end up breaking into cars, taking them for joyrides, and having these other things for them to do lowers the chance that they'll get involved in these activities, especially when we're taking a stance where we don't want to criminalize youth. We don't want to send them to juvenile hall. We don't want them to have those things on their record and have that negative impact in their lives. I think making sure that they never commit these things so that they're not kind of caught in a revolving door of doing these things and then not receiving any punishment and not really receiving any support to kind of give them other things to do to redirect their energy into positive, constructive activities. And I think that when it comes to enforcement in the city, I think there's an opportunity to just work with the police department to see what kind of administrative work they have, dedicate or move that administrative work to non-police officers, and then bring police officers out of their squad cars, out of car-borne sector patrol, and bring them back into the community on foot patrols so that they can establish relationships with the community, so that they don't see people in the community as an enemy, that is a threat, that they have to use their guns on all the time, that they don't trust, so that they can at least bring that presence so that they can discourage certain kinds of crimes, but also so that they're there building those relationships. Because right now, it's really tough in that the majority of police officers on sector patrol are in cars, and the majority of police officers in the San Francisco police force do not live in the city. 75% of police officers serving in San Francisco right now don't live in the city. So they don't have those, they may know people in the city, they may have family in the city, they may have been born and raised in the city. All I'm trying to say now is that they're working in communities where maybe they don't feel that attachment all the time, or they're not guaranteed to feel that attachment. When it comes to public transit, I feel like I'm really the only candidate that has like a serious concern for public transit. I'm not just giving it lip service. I actually ride it. And I actually am actively involved with the with the DSA to raise awareness for their Free Muni Full Service campaign, trying to raise funding support for Muni and to go fully free. Right now, Muni is 80% subsidized by tax dollars. I think that we see all across the country a number of cities that are taking their systems zero fare. In Europe, we see systems going zero fare. We have an opportunity to increase support, lower that barrier to entry, and make sure that there's a large amount of service available so that we don't just have six bus lines out of 60 that have like a frequency of 6 buses per hour. Right now, the majority of buses are at 4 or maybe 3 buses per hour. Some cases 2 buses per hour. I think we need to expand that service, make it reliable, make it dependable, so that the people riding public transit are not only those that absolutely depend on it, that have no other choice, but to make it a really quality, competitive option that people don't feel like they're sacrificing, people don't feel like they're losing out riding public transit, so that we can support taking some people that are maybe driving their car 100% of the time, encourage them to maybe walk, ride a bike, or to ride more reliable public transit. We don't need them to get on public transit every single day, but if, let's say, 100,000 people, or let's say half the city was willing to ride the bus once a week or twice a week, when other times they would be only driving their cars, it's like we have 50,000 new riders, 50,000 new regular riders. So I think I would just bring more support for public transit when we see all across the country a need to stop using private cars, even though we're buying more cars than ever, and public transit ridership has just been on the downturn for the past 20 years. So we really need to push to support it more so that we're actually using it, so we get all the benefits that public transit can bring us, whether that's traffic safety, just more people out and about to reduce crime, making people feel more safe and feel like their communities are vibrant, not just a bunch of cars buzzing along the roads, and also helping with climate change and protecting some people from the cost of increasing gas prices, at $6 and $7 a gallon, and it's just flying up and down all the time.
All right, thank you for that answer. Much appreciated. And then the third and final question from me is, what are the top 3 issues that you see concerning Visitation Valley, and how would you address them if elected?
That's a good question. From where I'm standing, I think for Viz Valley, like a lot of the rest of District 10, and maybe the whole city, people are concerned with public safety. I think that some of those things relate to what I already mentioned. It's reimbursing people that are interested in getting private security cameras. It's bringing more foot patrol or potentially more lights so that certain corridors always feel well lit. They always feel accessible. I know some people have raised concerns that lights can have like a negative impact on local wildlife. We have the Viz Valley Greenway, we have McLaren Park. So we want to make sure that the places we live are well lit, but we also don't want to negatively impact the local wildlife, so that our green spaces are not just grass and flowers, but also birds, insects, other parts of nature that are still here in the city. I think that there's also a concern for people getting their cars broken into, getting their businesses or homes broken into. And I've heard a lot of these stories, not only in Viz Valley, but also in all around the district. I think that foot patrols and more lighting would bring a change to those areas, and just making sure that there is attention in those areas, so that when we see that some people maybe that have broken into a business maybe are punished for those acts, or just that there are cameras in place to discourage people from those acts, knowing that someone is watching, that we might get caught, or there's a higher chance we might get caught. And I think that one way we can improve that public safety is also extending benefits to support local businesses. When I walk on Leland Avenue, there are a number of businesses that have been shuttered for a long time, maybe some in part to COVID, I think there are opportunities to extend more benefits. Board of Supervisors have already extended temporary benefits to some local businesses, slashing their first-time fees. That's a small help to help some businesses get off the ground and start serving customers, start bringing in revenue. I think there's an opportunity to support certain kinds of businesses like cooperatives that bring a lot of benefits to the people that are working for them. Those cooperatives largely employ people in the community. There's an opportunity to, inject all the benefits of all the pay, the revenue right back into the community and kind of re-energize a business corridor like Leland Avenue. And I think that that kind of targeted help and helping those small businesses would not only be beneficial for Leland Avenue, but also 3rd Street and 20th Street in Potrero Hill, and 3rd Street all along from Bayview all the way up to Dogpatch. I think that there's an opportunity to support more local businesses and to make sure that as few places as possible are shuttered or just sitting for rent. And I think when it comes to this valley, another big issue that is really related to the story of the East Side is what to do about the Superfund site at Schlage, what to do with all that open land. I think that when we look at the Navy shipyard, when we look at Treasure Island, there's been a lot of controversy and basically, testing being falsified, the Navy or different private developers trying to get that land into their hands so that they can start developing and selling dangerous property to people and basically passing along the risk of cancer to residents. I think since state support has been cut for a lot of these like land remediation programs, we need to kind of two things: work with our state legislators and federal legislators to kind of bring funding back into these programs so that we can rehabilitate the land where Schlage used to be, and also work on raising awareness around the city for these things. The Navy shipyard can't just be a District 10 thing. Treasure Island can't just be a District 6 thing. And Schlage just can't be kind of relegated to the history books. I feel like there's an opportunity for the Board of Supervisors, the mayor, to kind of raise awareness about these different parts of San Francisco and kind of bring and rally the support of the entire city so that we can bring those initial funds so we can justify and really push for support to like get the funds to start remediating that land, testing the soil, and raising awareness to get state legislators and federal legislators to kind of bring back the funding so that we can do something with this land so that it doesn't just sit as dry grass beside our Caltrain station, so it doesn't just sit as dry grass by Bayshore. Those are just a couple of things, but at least on my mind, that's what I'm thinking could bring some change to this valley. One other thing I might just throw in is I think because so much of District 10 is Bayview, so many more people live in Bayview compared to Potrero and Dogpatch and this valley. I think there's an opportunity to build coalition across neighborhoods so that the smaller neighborhoods don't fall by the wayside. That's the real big opportunity I see, so that we make sure that everybody is being well served by our representatives and by the government.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you for all those answers that you gave today. Much appreciated. And so now we're going to hear from the audience, questions that they might have. And Russell Marine is going to look at the chat or the Q&A and ask those questions. I'm sorry, go ahead.
All right, thank you. So we're going to transition into questions from the audience. So chat or Q&A, either way, we'll get to them and read them to Brian. But before we do that, I want to remind everyone that, as you know, we're here because of an election that's coming up November 8th. It's not just a supervisor at District 10, it's a general election. And if you're here, you're probably interested and you're probably going to vote, but a lot of your neighbors in Visitation Valley and Bayview don't vote. We're consistently at the bottom of the list in voter turnout as neighborhoods. So you definitely vote, tell your friends to vote, your family to vote, and let's see what we can do to move up from the bottom of the list and maybe somewhere in the middle so we can have a little bit more representation or attention from our elected officials. So I'm going to go to a question from the Q&A section. It's from an anonymous attendee. Given that D10 has a large population of non or limited English speaking residents, how can you increase communications and outreach for that population?
That's a great question. Thanks to that anonymous attendee. I think that At least in my own campaign, for myself individually, I've been studying Cantonese and Mandarin and Spanish for a while now. I think the big thing when it comes to communicating to a diverse community that maybe doesn't speak English, there's two things we do. One is providing English as a second language courses, making sure there's support and opportunity for people to learn English, because so much of San Francisco, so much of living in the United States is kind of locked behind English. If you don't know English, it's that much harder to get around in this country. You have to stay within certain communities. I know even for myself, my parents, Assyrian Americans that speak Assyrian, a lot of elders in our community, they come to this country and they never learn English. So they're basically dependent on their families. So like my grandma, when she was alive, she only spoke Assyrian. Even after like decades of living in Australia, she never learned English. So she always spoke Arabic or Assyrian with her family. And basically like all the elders in my community the same way. So I think that there's an opportunity to provide those classes so that, you know, if people want to learn, they can learn. And I think that the other step is just building a diverse coalition. So it's having an office of people that have roots in the community that speak the languages and also working to build coalition. Because I think that leaving it to one representative, leaving it to one office of maybe like 3 or 4 field staff means we're always going to fall short. But as long as we keep a very strong connection to the community, then we can build that coalition with people that live in the community, that speak the languages, and we know what to do for them. We know what kinds of resources that we need to provide, and we don't fall out of touch with them. I think that the city has a good policy on providing multilingual material, but I think a lot of the challenge there is it's not always proactive in the way that it reaches out and engages its community to find out, you know, what are the languages being spoken, what's the level of English being spoken, so that it can reach out all those communities. Right now, I think the requirement is that if there's at least 10,000 people speaking a particular language, the city will make it a requirement to provide multilingual additional materials and translation services in those languages. But I think for myself, the goal would be to provide those ESL classes and to build an office that can speak the languages, that has roots in the community, and is actively working with community organizations. And I think a third step would be to kind of increase funding and support for those community organizations so they have the power to do that kind of outreach and connection on their own, so that they're not dedicated to doing a lot of fundraising. They can focus on doing outreach and connecting with people in the community, and then kind of bringing those concerns or bringing those demands to representatives and the city. Because sometimes a lot of issues in the city, people basically have to go directly to the city departments and offices. The supervisor doesn't have the power to do anything except for writing some laws and asking for information from departments. Unless like the community initiates something, the city departments maybe will sit on their hands, or they'll dedicate their attention to the loudest neighborhoods. So I think that's the way I see it right now, with reaching out to people that don't speak English as their first language inside District 10.
All right, thank you. We have another question from Brianna. Why did you choose to run for district supervisor in District 10 over any other district?
Thank you for that question, Brianna. That's very interesting. I have heard from a couple of people that are giving me the feedback that I should have moved to a neighborhood that lines up with my values, that I should just run for election in a neighborhood that, you know, would vote Brian. So some people have told me, like, you know, why don't you live in District 6? And I guess for myself, I didn't look at running so strategically. I live in District 10 because that's what made sense for me. I moved to District 10 because of my roommates. We were in a situation where this is what checked the boxes for all of us. I have one of my roommates happens to be a doctor. He wanted to be in walking distance of Zuckerberg General Hospital, and this is kind of the deal we came to. So me personally, you know, maybe I wouldn't have minded living in a different place where I would pay less rent, but this is the kind of agreement I came. And living in District 10, I feel like I've been forced to learn a lot about San Francisco and engage with a lot of diverse communities that maybe I wouldn't have gotten if I lived in District 5, if I was living in Hayes Valley, or if I lived at the bottom of Noe Valley. So I think in District 10, I've been exposed to a lot. And I think one definite thing that I've learned a lot about is the Green Benefit District inside Dogpatch, Northwest Potrero Hill, in that it's the only green benefit district that exists in San Francisco right now. not for lack of trying. Other neighborhoods have tried, but only in District 10 have we successfully created a green benefit district. And I feel we've seen a lot of positive results when it comes to creating new parks, maintaining green spaces, and making a lot of changes that the community is asking for, putting money and consistent support to like interact with the city bureaucracy to make streets safer, to bring road improvements, and to lessen the negative impacts that District 10 experiences with both 101 and 280 cutting right through it. So that's my question, Brianna. Thank you. Or that's my answer to your question. Thank you, Brianna.
All right, thank you, Brian. So next question is from Rex. Rex has 3 questions. So I'm going to ask the first one, then I'm going to go to someone else, then I'll come back to the other 2. So the first question from Rex: people don't feel safe taking public transportation. How would you assure their safety?
This is a great question. And I feel like it's a really hard one to answer, Rex. I think one of the big things is SFMTA has an opportunity to kind of raise more awareness about how safe public transit is. I think that when we look at like traffic data, people feel like even though there's thousands of car accidents in San Francisco all the time, I don't think people include this in their mental math when they think about like what's the safest way to get around the city. Because I think when people ride public transit, they maybe see someone, you know, they're surrounded by people, or maybe they're on a bus alone with another person, maybe someone that's homeless, or maybe someone that maybe is actually using drugs on the bus. I'm no stranger to this. Regular rider, there can be needles on the bus sometime. There are people that are actively using drugs, or maybe just even smoking cigarettes or marijuana right on a minibus or on the T line. I think there's an opportunity for SFMTA to expand their support for raising awareness on maybe how good a job it does. I think there's that. I think supporting it to bring more ridership. I think with supporting a zero fare system, kind of lowering that barrier to entry, I hope that we can bring more people riding Muni so that when there's more people around, people will be less in we'll hopefully see less crimes. I know we've heard some really bad horror stories of people being assaulted or worse on Muni buses. I hope that if there are more people riding, we won't be hearing any of those kinds of stories. I think that we've seen some success with bringing ambassadors onto Muni lines. If we expand support for that so that we have people that show on Muni lines to give people guidance, to kind of maintain a bit of peace on the buses when people are maybe like a little rowdy, or maybe someone is struggling with something and then we need something to be done to make that particular bus in that particular moment feel a bit safer. But I think it's definitely something that has to be done in partnership with SFMTA to kind of raise awareness that like the buses are safer, and to expand our support for bringing more ambassadors onto our buses. And I think that with certain things, maybe with like dealing with a challenge of like unhoused residents, people that are struggling with homelessness, I think that if we're able to like solve that and address that, we might see less challenging things on the bus that will make people feel more comfortable riding in general. Definitely cleaning the buses more regularly, because later in the day, or later if you're riding the bus at night, those buses can get really dirty and really gross really fast. It's surprising that so many bad things can happen in just one day.
All right, thank you. This is a question from Julie T. It is specific kind of to the Bayview, and we do want to kind of focus a little bit on Viz Valley, but I'm going to ask it and just kind of if you can answer it in the context of this side as well as Bayview. So how can you improve the quality of life of Bayview residents when there are lots of illegal concrete and soil processing companies operating and polluting our community?
Yeah, this is a great question, Julie. I think for all of District 10, because it has so much more commercial and industrial parts, the real challenge is we need to kind of bring more control and regulation to make sure that these businesses are doing right by the community. And I think what will happen if we try to do that is these businesses will basically say, see, San Francisco's at it again, regulating businesses out of the area. Like, are you trying to kill all these jobs? Are you trying to kill all these opportunities for people in San Francisco? I think that we have an opportunity to kind of tighten the belt on these businesses to make sure that they're crossing their T's and dotting their I's and doing right by people living in the community around these businesses. And I think that would continue a lot of the work that the Board of Supervisors is doing to basically work with the city attorney to give cease and desist to different businesses, to fine them, and to bring meaningful punishments so that they can't just willy-nilly dump trash in neighborhoods and release toxic waste into local communities. And I think as long as we do that and we work with the rest of the city and hopefully the media to kind of recognize that holding businesses accountable should not be seen as getting rid of businesses from the city. Businesses should not be given a blank check to hurt anybody that lives next to them. I think that that's really the only thing to do. And if we have to stand by the people, otherwise we'll just be doing whatever the businesses want, and the businesses want to do whatever they want, no matter what the negative consequences are for anybody that lives around them. So I think we have the power to hold them accountable. We also have to stand strong when people start saying we're kicking businesses out of the neighborhood. We're trying to protect people in the neighborhood.
All right, thank you. This next question is from Gina Tovar. I'm going to slightly edit it at the end. So supervisors are often taxed with attending many meetings, serving on committees, and many public appearances. If elected, how will your office work to be available to hear the concerns of the constituents of Visitation Valley?
That's a great question from Gina. I think the big thing is keeping a strong, clear line of communication with all residents inside the district, letting them know that I have certain staff in the office that are available to answer these kinds of questions, making sure they understand the community, ideally that they have roots in the community and that they're able to speak the languages that are relevant to those communities. And I think that I want to just strongly communicate to the community that it's not up to like an office of 4 people to be all that, but really to elevate the community, and that actually really all the good work that will happen, it will be because of the community. And it will be the job of me and my office to basically clear obstacles and raise awareness. And when we build that coalition of all the great neighborhood organizations that already exist all around District 10, basically bringing them together and solving those problems and finding more people in the community that are maybe not in touch with those neighborhood organizations, that are currently not in touch with the supervisor's office, bring them together so that they can start interacting with the city bureaucracy and start working to solve those problems. Because I think at the end of the day, it's not going to come down to me and my office of 3 to 5 people. It's really going to be me working with dozens or hundreds of people all around District 10, maybe ideally thousands of people all over District 10 to kind of make those changes happen. And once we have that movement, I think we can productively deal with all kinds of problems. And anytime any similar issues come up, then we have all that shared experience, and then it will come down to my office to work with the rest of the Board of Supervisors or the mayor's office to kind of make a change happen when it can benefit the whole entire district or the city.
Okay, thank you. So I think this is more of a statement from Dorothy Curry. She said, yes, I really appreciate including the whole District 10 and not just the Bayview. So as you know, we're here in Visitation Valley and we're part of District 10. So I'm going to tie that into the next question from Brianna, another question for Brianna. And I'm going to interpret it as that, District 10 is a big district, but there's a lot of smaller neighborhoods within District 10 that are often overlooked. So can you just talk about a little bit about that? So as you know, Potrero Hill is not just Potrero Hill, and Bayview is not just Bayview. And Visitation Valley, you have Sunnydale, you have Little Hollywood. So can you talk a little bit about how you include the smaller sub neighborhoods?
Yeah, thank you for that great question. I think the real challenge is it always comes down to the numbers. And I think that where my office has an opportunity, if elected, to help out the smaller neighborhoods, is to have regular staff that are working with the smaller neighborhoods in District 10 to connect them with the existing neighborhood organizations, or to just work with the neighborhood organizations to kind of see what the problems are. I know sometimes a lot of the challenges that face the smaller neighborhoods inside District 10 is that they're smaller, or that they have boundaries that kind of span 2 districts. So when I think of Viz Valley, I really feel like it's kind of contiguous with the Portola neighborhood. So even though there may be people living across the hills from Viz Valley to Portola, they kind of respond to 2 different supervisors. And you'd think that would be double the help. But in some sense, it's more challenging because, they build that coalition and now they have two people to talk to. I think the thing to do is use my office to connect with as many people as possible and to give dedicated attention to the smaller neighborhoods so that we're finding out what the problems are and helping them push along certain challenges. When I think about some of just like the blocks that I've talked to in the Bayview and Potrero Hill, I think one of the challenges is a lot of this work, if it's not being done by like a nonprofit, if it's up to a neighborhood organization, it's a lot of people's volunteer hours. And I think that's the problem that basically all of San Francisco is facing. When there are problems in the neighborhood, it's left up to volunteers to sacrifice time in their own days, in their own lives, to kind of bring these issues to the forefront and to constantly fight and engage with the city bureaucracy to make a change happen. And I think the things are the way they are is because the city wants to spend less money, which is surprising, right? Because it's like our budget is $14 billion. You say that's less money. So the system is set up this way because they're waiting for us to say something. And if we say nothing, they can do less. So when we think about things like the traffic calming program with SFMTA, it has an application period. If you want to make changes to your road so that traffic slows down a little bit, it's safer at crosswalks for pedestrians, you have to apply. SFMTA is not going to come to us and say like, hey, what if we saw that people are speeding. Can we help your neighborhood? They're waiting for us to say people are speeding in our neighborhood. Stop that, And I think that's the real challenge for every neighborhood. But I hope that my office will connect themselves with the smaller neighborhoods, connect them or help the growth of community organizations so that we have people that are dedicated to raising these issues and interacting with the city bureaucracy. Because I guess, again, it's not going to come down to just me and like 3 other people. I need the help of as many people as possible in District 10 so that what you see, you show me, and we show it to the city so that we make something happen. And I guess when I think about community benefit districts and the green benefit district, the power of that is that in the short term, we can raise some funds to pay someone to actively be working on that, to be doing that for us, and then working to raise awareness so that we raise those city funds so that someone is tackling those problems. Because like the big challenge is the reason why the city works this way, where they want to wait for us to complain, they want to wait for us to like say, we need this help, is, they want to cut as much as they can. And when we look at like all the stuff that they skip out on, as an example for the Department of Recreation and Parks, they have something like billions of dollars of repairs or deferred maintenance. So, that money's got to come from somewhere, I guess, but do we want to pay those billions of dollars? We should, right? Because we don't want our parks and our green spaces go to waste. But right now, the city policy is basically to kind of do less so that we can make the money we have do more, I guess. Kind of a long answer, not an easy one, but I think the big thing is my office will work with the community to kind of support and foster community organizations so that we can have as many people as possible working with the city government to address these challenges. And when we see that the city is choking, it's struggling to deal with all that demand, then we'll see, okay, we have to increase support for this. Okay, we need more funds to make this critical work happen for people in the community.
All right, thank you. And at this point, if there's any questions that are in the translation rooms, start to make those known so we can get those on the list. Here's a question from, again, Rex about housing. You mentioned housing in a program or some idea about renter to ownership program. It's a great idea, but how would you fund it?
It's a great question. Thank you, Rex. I think right now, a lot of the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development gets a lot of its funding basically from different kinds of business taxes and also taxing private developers. So the challenge right now is we kind of, especially on the east side of the city, developers build a lot, and then in the past, what we would make them do is include affordable housing on site. Nowadays, it's okay for them to just pay the price or the value of that affordable housing, and those funds go into the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development. So right now, that's where the Mayor's Office can basically fund providing rental support. They can that's how they get the BMR units that are below market rate for residents, and that's how they provide some of the first-time homeowner loans. And the way they justify it is you have to go through classes to earn any of these. I've attended a couple because I qualify and I would like to take advantage of it if I can. But it's even that sometimes like taking 8 hours of training or like 4 hours of training to qualify, getting all your ducks in a row to say, okay, well, now you've gotten all your ducks in a row. Here's the money. I think that the real opportunity besides increasing taxes is we have to look at the way we are currently spending funds. I think it's really, we're in a really funny situation where, let's say there's currently 8,000 people that are unhoused or like insufficiently housed. And there's maybe like 10,000 people that are in a very desperate situation where like they're living paycheck to paycheck and the rent is just crazy. It would be cheaper for us if we just paid the rent of 18,000 people versus the current budget for homelessness and supportive housing. We would have leftover money to pay the rent of 40,000 people if we wanted to with the size of the budget. So I think there's an opportunity to kind of think differently about the way we're currently using our money and then work from there. So like once people are off the street, once people that have been struggling with the cost of living in San Francisco are properly housed, we can start thinking differently about how we're using our money to help people kick drug abuse, help people deal with mental health challenges, and make sure that people that were like insufficiently housed, that were like dealing with a big cost burden, that we're lowering that cost of living so that people can still take advantage of the opportunities in San Francisco, so they can still live in San Francisco, especially if it's the place that they've called home for their entire lives. Doesn't really answer your question, Rex, but I think the big opportunity besides raising taxes is to look at the taxes we already have and the big budget we already have to use that money a little bit smarter so that we free up our funds and start being a little more targeted. And I think in the long term, one way to put a lot of pressure on private developers is to take those funds to start building more public housing and more social housing, not just tearing down public housing and then replacing it one for one, which is kind of the current plan for San Francisco. We tear down public housing, we build it new and fresh. I think there's opportunity to just build more now and kind of push private developers to make the new developments they do cheaper and more affordable rather than focusing on, getting as much money as they can, but to still be competitive and to work for the people that currently live in the city.
All right, thank you, Brian. Here's another question from Dorothy. How would you stop people from dumping trash and garbage on the streets in Visitation Valley?
Thanks for that question, Dorothy. I think there are a couple of ways. I think one big thing is enforcement of trash dumping laws, bringing cameras to more intersections and kind of finding out which cars are doing this dumping. I think in the cases where we do know who it is, it's just about making sure that there are fines and punishments in place so that people don't feel inclined to do this. I know that for businesses that have done this, we've punished them, we fined them, and the city attorney's office has, threatened them with different suits, legal fines, and so forth to get them to do things the right way. I think when it comes to illegal dumping, it's bringing punishment for people that are maybe doing that. But it's another set of things is just making sure that we are working with Recology to make sure we're picking up trash in the city and to expand trash cans in the city. Maybe not $20,000 or $80,000 trash cans, but just making sure that there's a place to throw our trash away so that, we don't see people dumping beds or big boxes and all kinds of other junk wherever they can put it along the roadways and inside like far off suburban neighborhoods that maybe Recology doesn't get to as often or are not served by the city. But I think it's challenging, but I think we just do kind of what we're doing and ramp it up. So I hope that's a good answer, Brianna.
Okay, thank you. So I think we have about 10 minutes left and we want to give you enough time to make your closing statement. So we have 2 more questions. You can do maybe quick answers on them and then we can close it out if there's no other questions in the translation rooms. I'm going to go to Brianna. She says or asks a question. Are you willing to be present in the community before and after the election, if elected?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, Brianna. And I'm sorry for my little mix up earlier. I think I absolutely would. I think before I came to the city, I got more politically involved when I volunteered with Evan Lowe's office. I think in the city now, I have been committed to volunteering. I'm involved with the DSA's Free Community Full Service Program. This is not related to San Francisco, but I think I will expand this in San Francisco. I will be on the San Mateo County Libraries Foundation, Friends of the San Mateo County Libraries Foundation board, raising funds for San Mateo County for their libraries, working in places like East Palo Alto to get them a library. Right now, they don't have a library. They have they have a room with books. So ideally in East Palo Alto in the next year, we can buy the land and start building an actual library in East Palo Alto. In San Francisco, I've been working with the Green Benefit District. Inside Dogpatch in Northwest Ventura Hill. I would really like to see more places in San Francisco have green benefit districts, bring more community support in the local neighborhood for green spaces, more local community stewardship. It already exists because we have lots of Friends of, insert your park name here. We have Kingstar Open Space. We have the India Basin Neighborhood Association supporting Heron's Head Park and the India Basin Park. I think we can work, I would love to continue working with these organizations all around District 10 to bring more support for them. And I would love to see a community benefit district along 3rd Street and on 20th Street inside Potrero Hill, or even Leland Avenue, to be honest. I think a community benefit district would bring a lot of power and re-energize a lot of neighborhoods. Not to say they're not already energetic, but bring a consistent level of support for paying for the different basic business needs that businesses may need, raising awareness and kind of building that coalition so that these different commercial corridors or different neighborhoods around green spaces have that cohesion. And it doesn't only fall on volunteers, but we get like kind of system in place so that it's easier to kind of bring people in the community into these organizations, to train them, to get them more civically involved and get them engaging with city government so they can change it a little more. And I think another thing that I've been involved with is every single Saturday, I'm at Double Rock Baptist Church working with the SFRN Food Bank, loading groceries into trucks for different churches around the neighborhood. I think the way I see it, I want to get more involved. So no matter what happens this November, I will still be part of the neighborhood. And I hope that tonight is not the last time you hear from me.
Thank you. So this will be the last question. And it's from Rex. It's, what's your position on recalls? Thanks
for that question, Rex. I know a lot of people raise concern about the recalls as being a kind of a negative effect on democracy, or it costs money because we have to print ballots and kind of run new elections. I think overall we have the recall process because, it's in California State Charter, but it's part of democracy. I think that when elected representatives are not doing their job and the community feels like they're not doing their job, it's in their right to kind of raise that awareness and threaten them with a recall. I think that we have lots of examples for federal legislators once they're in office, they can just tune out and ignore their constituents. They can focus on the people that can show up in their offices, that can show up in Washington, D.C., to constantly knock on their door, to even write legislation for them. I think that we may have to keep recalls just so that people inside the community have some power to kind of put a fire under our elected representatives, to let them know that if they're not showing up for their representatives, that there are going to be consequences. But at the same time, I also think that San Francisco has a lot of election protections that kind of restrict who can donate into campaigns. I've seen that firsthand running my campaign. I think there are opportunities to potentially make it harder for large, wealthy organizations or businesses to influence our elections, while keeping recalls available to people in the community, so that when we want to recall somebody, it's still there, but maybe not so influenced by people that have hundreds of thousands of dollars to inject into campaigns when they don't even live in San Francisco. So I think we can keep recalls. Recalls are good. They're part of democracy, but I think we can protect ourselves from organizations all over the Bay Area and California that are really interested in what happens in San Francisco, even though they don't live in San Francisco.
All right, thank you. We did have one last question that's kind of slipped in under the wire. And I think it's from Gina, and it's centered on full-time employees, constituents of Visitation Valley. So I'm going to interpret this as, people work, blue-collar jobs. and it's hard for people to get together and meet in here and have meetings. So if elected, would you be open to doing something like a in-person state of the district town hall type of meetings out in Visitation Valley?
100%, 100%. Thanks again for that question, Gina. I actually have been very surprised that living in San Francisco, I've received more mail and notifications from my representatives from when I lived in San Jose, Santa Clara County. I'm still getting hounded by all the politicians in Santa Clara County, and I feel like I get paltry little from local politicians and even the politicians like Scott Wiener that represent me or Matt Haney that represents me in the state assembly. I think that there is a huge opportunity to regularly meet in the community. I think bringing even monthly meetings inside all the different neighborhoods inside District 10 would have a huge effect. I think that building that and kind of making that a systemic cultural part of the community would make sure that certain issues are being dealt with, that people are involved in the process, and would just be an overall positive. And I think that it would make it more systemic so that no matter who's in office, it's something that's constantly being done or being asked for, or just done by the community anyways. And I think that's the ideal, is you want a systemic change that will last. Because when my experience working for the city, seeing the city, is that a lot of things, or even working in private companies, a lot of things fall on a person or a team. And once that person or team is gone, that whole project falls apart. So I think having like monthly meetings, having more regular meetings on a consistent basis with the neighborhood will build that culture, will build the systemic support for ensuring we have these regular meetings. And there's this direct line from in the neighborhoods into the Board of Supervisors, into City Hall. And it's not just going to fall apart when one person in their office leaves office.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to turn it back over to the host to close us out. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much, sir, for your participation here today. Uh-oh. Am I still here? Okay.
I'm still here.
All right, thank you. I just got a signal I've been signed out. So thank you for your participation, for answers to all the questions. We really appreciate it, and we wish you well. Thank you, everyone, for participating as well, and for tuning in to this town hall. Everyone have a good evening.
Good night, everyone.